The sun is past its zenith over Rome, marking midday, and if you were standing anywhere near the massive Colosseum, the air would be thick.
Oh, incredibly thick, with the smells of sweat, spilled wine, and just the coppery tang of old blood.
And the sand on the arena floor, it's dark, right? Soaked through from the morning's animal hunts.
But this isn't the heroic spectacle of gladiators you're probably thinking of.
No, this is something else entirely. This is the hour of the condemned.
It is. It's precisely the moment when the vast, complex machinery of the Roman justice system transforms raw human beings.
Slaves, criminals, political enemies.
Exactly. It turns them into a public product.
Yeah.
And that product is optimized, spectacular, and prolonged human suffering.
For this deep dive, we're focusing on one person dragged out onto that stained sand. Her name is Aurelia Tertia.
A really tragic case.
She's so young, only 23. A freed woman, but she's been accused of veno-physician poisoning.
Specifically, poisoning the wife of her former master. She maintained her innocence, of course.
But at this point, that doesn't matter. The law has run its course. The preliminary torture, which was standard for non-citizens, has already left her unable to walk.
So she's being held up by guards, and you can be sure they're not being gentle about it.
We really need to set the scene here, not just physically, but emotionally. You might imagine this, silent, rapt crowd.
But that's completely wrong. We are talking about 50,000 Romans filling the benches, but a lot of them are just finishing their midday meals.
They're chatting, betting on how long the executions will take.
Gossiping about the morning hunt. I mean, it's a transition period in the entertainment schedule. For many, the dying of these people is just background noise to their lunch.
And for Aurelia standing there, it must be this horrifying sensory overload.
Absolutely. The smell of blood and animal offal, the intense heat of the sun, the heat radiating up from the sand.
She can see the others who share her fate. There are 7 men, 3 other women.
All scheduled to die in the next hour, but none of them know how.
That part is just chilling. The method of execution was deliberately withheld.
She will only know what form her final torment will take at the exact moment it begins.
That psychological element, that complete uncertainty, has to be an intentional part of the system.
Oh, it maximizes the terror. You're just waiting, knowing only that it will be gruesome, public, and designed for maximum visibility. It's the ultimate degradation.
And for Aurelia, the method arrives. The arena master gestures and 2 attendants approach.
They're carrying what looks like a rough garment, coarse linen, but it's glistening.
Saturated with some kind of dark, oily substance. And then the horrifying recognition. It's the tuna molesta.
The troublesome shirt.
The name itself.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? The institutional detachment of Rome. Tuna molesta. It's clinical terminology for turning a living human being into a theatrical flame.
And this is where we begin our mission today.
Let's do it.
So our goal today is a deep dive into the truth behind Roman spectacle. Because that standard image we all have, gladiators, thumbs up, thumbs down, it's, as the sources from the time say, radically incomplete.
Radically. The main events were always preceded by this. The ludi meridiani, the systematic, scheduled, advertised execution of condemned prisoners.
And the scope is just immense. We're synthesizing administrative records, the logbooks of the arena managers with medical reports.
Notably from Galen, and the stark philosophical observations of figures like Seneca. We need to understand not just what they did, but why this industrialized cruelty became so central to Roman social life for 4 centuries.
We are going way beyond just killing. We're detailing 13 specific, brutal methods that have been sort of sanitized from history.
And we're focusing on how these deaths were organized, engineered, and optimized. This is not a chaotic frenzy.
It was an industry.
A full-blown industry. And here's where it gets really interesting. The death itself was often secondary to the show. The primary product being sold and consumed by that Roman audience was the prolonged spectacle of suffering.
We have to look at not just what ended their lives, but how long they took to die and what the crowd demanded in between. Okay, so let's anchor this in the schedule. The ludi meridiani, the noon games.
Right. This wasn't some hidden, shameful thing. It was a specific, fixed, and expected time slot in the arena's daily program.
The whole day was structured.
Rigorously. The morning was the high-energy venations, the animal hunts, with exotic beasts from all over the empire.
Lions, tigers, bears.
You name it. Then came the noon slot, the executions, and finally the afternoon, the climax with the elite gladiatorial matches.
So the executions were the meat in that sandwich.
Literally.
And yet it was the least prestigious slot. Many of the elites, the senators, they would leave for lunch. What does that tell us about the audience who stayed?
The sources suggest they were the true connoisseurs of raw spectacle. They were seeking a specific, unobstructed, and prolonged kind of violence.
They weren't there for the sport of it.
Not at all. For the Romans who stayed, this was a guaranteed source of mortal violence without any of the confusing elements like, skill or honor or defense.
To really get inside the mindset that allowed this, we have to turn to Seneca.
Yes. His writings give us this horrifying first-hand account. He just happened to be walking past the arena complex at midday.
And what he saw shocked even him, a man living in that violent society.
He said he expected it to be quiet, a moment of rest. Instead, he found the noon executions in full swing. He wrote that the morning fights, the hunts, were merciful by comparison.
Merciful by comparison. Why that distinction?
He observed that in the noon slot, all pretense was stripped away.
Meaning?
No armor, no helmet, no shield, and crucially, no training. These were just prisoners thrown out there, completely exposed.
My crowd loved it.
They preferred it, Seneca noted. It was unmitigated slaughter. There was no defense involved, only killing. He saw that the audience's appetite was for pure, unadulterated death spectacle.
It's his philosophical take that's so damning. He basically looks at the audience and asks, what have you done, poor wretch, that you should deserve to watch it?
Exactly. He understood that the spectacle was corrupting the very soul of the observer.
He saw the core moral failure. The expectation is just continuous escalating violence.
The outcome is always death, and the system is designed to provide the maximum output of that product.
This brings us to the sheer staggering scale of this operation. When we say industry, the numbers back that up.
They really do. Our sources, from archaeology, burial sites, literary accounts, they estimate the Roman arena system killed between 200,000 and 400,000 people.
400,000, over 4 centuries across 3 continents.
And that's a conservative estimate of a systematic, institutionalized death toll dedicated purely to public spectacle. It's hard to grasp.
And who were these people?
It was the cross-section of who Rome considered disposable. Slaves, religious minorities, Christians and Jews, especially political enemies, and citizens convicted of capital crimes.
And this was just routine, day in, day out. For a typical day of games, estimates suggest they executed anywhere from 10 to 30 prisoners.
Just in that noon slot alone.
The logistics of that.
Think about it. Every single afternoon, the administrative staff was processing 2 or 3 dozen people, verifying identities, assigning the execution method, providing the animals or props, and making sure it all ran on time before the gladiators showed up.
This horrifying level of organization was just daily life in Rome for centuries. So let's get back to Aurelia Tertia. She's in the arena, facing that dark garment, the tuna molesta.
We're now diving into the first major category, death by fire. And this wasn't accidental fire. This was theatrical, engineered combustion.
Designed for maximum visibility, theatrical flair, and most importantly,
Duration. The tunic was cheap linen because it was porous, so it could soak up the combustible mixture. And that mixture was critical.
pitch, resin, and animal fat. Why that specific combination?
Because they burn slowly. They adhere to the fabric, and they don't just flash burn. When they're ignited, the flames would consume the victim over a calculated period of 10 to 15 minutes.
It's a mechanism designed to prolong the death.
Precisely. And the choreography was just as precise. The unlit tunic was pulled over the prisoner, secured tightly. Aurelia would have been secured to a post, wrists and ankles, held upright for the show.
And the ignition itself was part of the theater.
Oh, yeah. Attendants with torches approaching from multiple directions to ensure it all lit up at once, spreading evenly, meticulously staged.
The administrative records, they're just chilling. We know Aurelia's case was logged. The conviction, the sentencing method.
But it's that final dehumanizing detail, the note confirming that her execution was well received by the crowd.
Well received by the crowd.
That note, or sometimes satisfactory entertainment value, is the most damning indictment of the whole bureaucracy. It confirms the system prioritized the reception of the suffering.
It was all about market demand.
And medically, the reality is horrific. Modern burn specialists estimate that even if the fire took 15 minutes, victims remained fully conscious for between 3 and 8 minutes.
Those first few minutes, being fully aware while this pitch-soaked linen begins to melt and ignite.
Absolute agony before shock or asphyxiation could even begin to set in.
And we have the famous historical connection to Nero, right?
We do. Tacitus describes Nero using this same method on condemned Christians to illuminate his garden parties. serving as substitutes for daylight.
So this wasn't just for the arena, it was a flexible technology of cruelty.
Whenever a prolonged public flame was required, the forensic analysis is grim. About 70% of victims died from shock and massive fluid loss, not from the fire itself.
Meaning it was a messy, slow death from accumulated trauma.
Exactly. Which is different from the other major fire execution, the crematio, burning at the stake.
Okay, so what's the distinction?
With crematio, the fire kills from below, rising up. It's not spreading across the surface of the body like with the tunic.
Let's look at the case of Lucius Varius Ambustus, executed in 203 CE for arson.
A classic case. Bound to a wooden stake, combustibles piled to about waist height and then ignited.
This method was designed for an even longer duration.
Much longer. Estimates are between 20 and 45 minutes. And Ambustus's own administrative record confirms this. Execution started at the 6th hour. Death confirmed at the 7th hour, minus a quarter.
That's 45 minutes of sustained burning.
Nearly an hour of public, agonizing death. Witness accounts describe the skin blistering, then blackening and splitting. The sight of melting human fat actually feeding the fire was reportedly part of the expected spectacle.
How long would they stay conscious?
Longer. Because the flames started low, they were likely aware until the fire reached the chest and affected their breathing. So potentially 15 to 30 minutes of conscious suffering.
Okay, if fire was optimized for visibility, our next category, damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, was optimized for something else.
For duration and staged variety, we have to get rid of the popular image right away. This was not simply throwing prisoners to lions.
Here's it all.
It was a sophisticated, elaborate production. It involved multiple species, carefully managed intervals, and timing designed explicitly to extend the death.
Our case study here is Publius Aelius Fortunatus, a merchant convicted of fraud against the imperial treasury in 177 CE.
His record is a manual of cruelty. It specifies the animals, 3 bears, 2 leopards, and a pack of 12 trained wild dogs. But the key administrative term is extended exposure intervals.
Extended exposure intervals, what does that mean in practice?
It's the operational manual for his suffering. He was bound to a stake, and the animals were released one species at a time, with long breaks in between.
So the crowd could observe the accumulation of injuries.
Exactly, and the deepening of his despair. It all started with phase 1, the dogs.
Why dogs first?
They were trained to attack the extremities, hands, feet, face. The goal was spectacular, visible bleeding without a quick, fatal wound. They do that for about 15 minutes.
And then came the first interval.
The dogs are recalled, and Fortunatus is left bleeding against the stake. This interval could last 20 or 30 minutes. This was the social part of the execution.
The crowd would eat, drink,
and place bets on his survival time. The execution was fully integrated into the gambling culture of the games.
Phase 2. The leopards.
Release next. More calculated. They strike and withdraw, compounding the existing injuries. That goes on for about 20 minutes.
And finally, phase 3. The bears.
Save for the finale. By this point, Fortunatus has been in the arena for over an hour. He's in shock, massive blood loss, barely conscious. The bear's strength delivers the final, conclusive blow.
How long did this whole process take?
The total documented duration for his staged dismemberment was approximately 90 minutes.
An hour and a half.
A full hour and a half of sustained execution spectacle, logged clinically in the records as satisfactory.
The physician Galen, he understood this perfectly. He was a doctor for gladiators. He saw these wounds.
He did. He noted that beasts do not kill cleanly as soldiers do. They tear and rend. Death comes from exhaustion, shock, and accumulated damage.
It's not a single decisive wound.
Rarely. And there was a whole hierarchy. Lions were for the most serious crimes like treason, bears, leopards, dogs for lesser offenses. Sometimes they'd even give the prisoners useless weapons like a broken spear, just for the illusion of a fight.
And within this category, there's the Sohnheit execution.
This is a whole other level of psychological horror. We have the case of Publius Aurelius Fustus, convicted of robbery and murder.
What was the process here?
Meticulously brutal. The condemned was stripped naked and sewn entirely into the freshly flayed skin of a wolf or a dog.
Freshly flayed, that's the key.
It is. As the wet skin dried, it would shrink and tighten around the body. An incredibly painful, constricting straitjacket.
And the sensory element is terrifying. The smell of the fresh hide.
Was the trigger. It signaled aggression in the trained attack dogs. And crucially, the hide often covered the face completely.
So he was blind.
Blind and deafened by the tightening skin. He couldn't see the dogs coming. He could only hear the snarling, feel the pressure of the hide, and then feel the teeth finally breaking through.
Pure psychological terror. How long did that take?
Faustus's execution took 14 minutes, comparatively short, but the intensity of the sensory deprivation made it a uniquely terrifying spectacle.
Moving on, we enter the realm of what you can only call psychological atrocity. Methods designed not just to kill the body, but to destroy the spirit. We start with forced combat.
The simplest, but arguably the most morally corrosive format. Condemned prisoners, no combat training, were paired against each other.
They're given a sword or a club, but no armor.
Zero protection. And they were required to fight until one of them died. The survivor was then immediately paired against the next person, and so on, until everyone was dead.
The essential cruelty is captured in the record of Leina Sabina, a slave executed for murdering her master during an escape attempt.
Her penalty was designed to be exemplary, a warning to other slaves.
And her record it's chilling in its brevity.
It is. Paired first against a man convicted of property crimes, whom she killed after 4 minutes of combat. Then immediately paired against the next man, by whom she was killed after 7 minutes of combat.
She was forced to become a killer before she became a victim.
A slave woman with no training, covered in the blood of a man she just killed, immediately facing the next person. It's the ultimate degradation.
But what if they refuse to fight?
A common reaction. If they try to drop their weapons or surrender, the arena attendants use hot irons and whips. Seneca called it fire and sword. They literally drove the combatants together.
Passivity was not an escape.
No, that forcing of compliance is critical. Modern psychologists call this participation in atrocity, a method of moral contamination that compounds the physical death.
The state forced them to commit murder publicly before the state killed them.
The arena functioned as a moral vice, squeezing out every last measure of human dignity.
And then we get to the peak of theatrical cruelty. The ludi fatalis. Fatal charades.
Mythological executions. Condemned prisoners forced to act out famous, fatal myths, with the deaths being entirely real.
These are huge productions.
Massive. Elaborate backdrops, costumes, choreography, extremely expensive, usually reserved for major imperial games. They merged high culture with industrialized death.
Let's look at the case of Marcus Ulpius Stephanus, convicted of sacrilege, theft from a temple.
His assigned role was Orpheus, torn apart by the Maenads.
The staging was meticulous.
A forest backdrop, a costume, a lyre strapped to his back. He was required to pretend to play the lyre, before the fatal element, a trained bear, was released to tear him apart.
Forcing the victim to perform his own death sentence.
Within a tragic narrative, no less. And the poet Martial, he boasted about this stuff. He wrote that the arena makes real whatever fame has sung.
He also wrote about that horrifying case of Laureus, who was crucified and then attacked by a bear while still alive on the cross.
So the arena wasn't just reenacting myth. It was optimizing it for maximum spectacle.
Which brings us to the Pasiphae execution, the most disturbing one.
Reenacting the myth of Queen Pasiphae mating with a bull. The arena version involved condemned women being placed in specially constructed wooden devices.
To facilitate actual forced sexual coupling with bulls.
Yes. The case we have is Volumnia Sithis, convicted of adultery with a senator. The sexual nature of her death was assigned specifically to fit the crime.
Retributive justice.
As they saw it. The records note the assignment, the construction of the device, the bull from the imperial stables. This wasn't a quick death. It was designed to satisfy what the sources call the darkest appetites of the crowds.
The list of myths they used is long.
Always involving violent death. Icarus falling meant prisoners thrown from heights. Hercules burning meant prisoners burned alive. Prometheus meant prisoners tied to rocks while trained birds attacked them. Every single time, a real person dying in a role they didn't choose.
Let's shift now to Section 5, the specialized and rare execution methods. These often carried immense symbolic weight.
Absolutely. We can start with the elephant execution. This was rare because, not every arena had an elephant.
But the symbolism was huge.
Immense. It was reserved for offenses that personally insulted the emperor, or for high treason. To be killed by an elephant was to be crushed by the emperor's personal, enormous instrument of power.
We have the case of Flavia Domitilla, executed around 95 CE by her own cousin, the Emperor Domitian.
Her crime was converting to Judaism or Christianity, which was seen as a personal betrayal of the imperial cult.
And the method was crushing by a trained elephant. The cruelty was in the training to crush slowly.
Later accounts suggest she got the slow variant. The elephant began with her feet, then her legs, then her hips. A process lasting 10 to 15 minutes for the final chest-crushing blow.
Domitian reportedly watched the whole thing from his imperial box. It's not just killing, it's an imperial statement.
Exactly. Next, the naumachia, staged naval battles.
We think of the spectacle flooding the arena, but for the participants, it was mass execution.
Efficient mass execution disguised as historical reenactment. Our case study is Gas Sergius Basis, a sailor convicted of mutiny, executed in Claudius's famous Naumachia in 52 CE.
The scale is just staggering.
Claudius used the Fucine Lake. 19,000 condemned prisoners were crewed into two opposing fleets.
19,000.
They were forced to fight until one side was killed or drowned. The water was often deliberately muddied to make swimming impossible. Mortality rates approached 90%.
What does Basis records say?
Body not recovered, death presumed. It was just an efficient way to kill thousands in a single afternoon.
Okay, from mass scale to individual torture,
Yeah.
the rack or aquilius.
Often used during periods of religious persecution. Claudia Felicitas, a Christian martyr, was executed this way around 250 CE.
It's a large wooden frame, the victim is bound, and levers are used to stretch them.
Slowly dislocating shoulders, hips, knees. The duration here is what's so horrifying.
How long?
Felicitas spent 5 hours on the rack,
5 hours.
from the 3rd to the 8th hour of the day. 5 hours of systematic stretching, massive internal bleeding, all while the public watched. The goal wasn't just to kill, it was to break the will publicly.
Then there's geographical cruelty. Burial in sand.
Specific to desert regions, Roman Africa, Egypt. The environment itself becomes the executioner.
Our case is Septimia Zosimi, a slave in Tunisia convicted of theft.
The method was simple but devastating. Buried up to the neck in the arena sand and left exposed to the sun,
Death from heat stroke, dehydration, or
animal attack.
Right.
Septimia's death took 7 hours, and the log notes her death ended with subsequent animal access.
Meaning dogs or jackals were allowed access to her exposed head as she was dying?
She provided all-day background entertainment.
Then there's the fura, the wooden fork, a device for slaves.
A heavy Y-shaped yoke around the neck, arms bound to the branches. You're completely defenseless, can't shield your face, can't move.
The slave Titus Flavius Heroes was subjected to this.
He received progressive punishment while on the fork. First flogging 200 strokes, then branding, then exposure to dogs. The fork just held him exposed, emphasizing his status as property.
And finally, precipitation, throwing from heights.
Often framed as Icarus falling. Prisoners thrown from platforms 45 to 90 feet high. Julia Priscilla, a 19-year-old, was thrown from a 40-cubit platform.
And the key detail is that the fall often wasn't immediately fatal.
Right. Julia survived with severe injury, not immediate death.
So what happened?
She was then killed by animal exposure. The whole thing took about an hour. As Marshall said, the arena improves on the myth by providing a second death if the first one fails.
We've saved the darkest corner for last. Methods designed to satisfy, as the sources put it, the darkest appetites. This is the realm of sexual executions.
These were specific methods that combined extreme violation with public killing, primarily aimed at women convicted of crimes related to sex, theft, or prostitution.
We go back to the records, to Actia Alexandrina, a slave convicted of theft and prostitution in 109 CE.
Her record notes her sentencing method was Pasiphae staging with subsequent animal exposure.
The clinical language again, concealing the horror.
A woman forced into a device for assault by a bull, then predatory animals finished the killing. These acts weren't limited to animals. Sometimes condemned male criminals were used.
The Christian writer Tertullian condemned this, saying, "We see women given not merely to death, but to defilement before death."
And the sources confirm these types of executions were about 5 to 10% of female arena deaths.
But if we step back from all 13 methods, the truly essential thing to grasp is the sheer bureaucracy of cruelty that underpin this whole system.
Yes. This was not random, spontaneous sadism. This was an organized, state-sanctioned, and profitable industry.
The administrative documents prove it. They track the efficiency of each execution. Did the fire last long enough? Did the animal follow the script?
And critically, they tracked crowd reception. Was a death positive, well-received, or just satisfactory? They were constantly experimenting to optimize the entertainment value. The system learned how to be crueler.
And this cold, calculating organization even involved medicine.
Arena physicians, like Galen, studied the wound patterns, the rate of blood loss. Their observations informed both medical knowledge and execution technique.
The cruelty was optimized. It was the result of institutionalized scientific inquiry into maximizing suffering.
So we've looked at this clinically, but we have to end by reconnecting this abstract brutality back to the individual human lives destroyed by it.
We have to recall the names, remembering them not as statistics, but as victims.
Victims whose final moments were choreographed and timed.
Aurelia Tertia, the freed woman, burned for a calculated 15 minutes in the pitch-soaked garment.
Publius Aelius Fortunatus, subjected to 90 minutes of staged dismemberment while the crowd ate lunch and placed bets.
Licinia Sabina, the slave, forced to kill a man in 4 minutes before being killed herself in 7.
Claudia Felicitas, the Christian who endured 5 agonizing hours on the rack for her faith.
Flavia Domitilla, an imperial family member, slowly crushed by an elephant on the personal orders of her cousin, the emperor.
Gaius Sergius Bassus, the sailor, who drowned in the cold, muddied water of the Naumachia with 18,000 other men.
Septimia Zosimi, who spent 7 hours buried up to her neck in the sand, dying from exposure before the animals were allowed access to her head.
And Volumius Aetas, condemned to the Pacifi execution, whose degradation was considered appropriate entertainment.
These were the hundreds of thousands of forgotten names. Slaves, religious minorities, political enemies, citizens who died because the Roman system considered their suffering a necessary spectacle for afternoon crowds.
This is the essential dichotomy we have to grapple with. Rome was the civilization that gave the world foundational law, incredible engineering, the aqueducts, the pantheon, and the profound philosophy of Virgil and Marcus Aurelius.
Right.
Yet this same civilization produced an industrial bureaucratic system dedicated to transforming human suffering into profitable social entertainment for 4 centuries.
What's fascinating is that the high civilization, the organization, the record-keeping, was what enabled the cruelty to operate on such a massive scale.
It was the systemization that made the atrocity routine. The lesson is profound and unsettling. Cruelty, when given institutional form, scheduled hours, and normalized by mass participation, it ceases to shock. It becomes ordinary.
When the state is optimizing pain and logging the crowd's reaction, human suffering is transformed into a mundane commodity, just sandwiched between a hunt and a sporting event.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, when you encounter historical grandeur?
When you see the magnificent ruins of the Colosseum today, remember the names we discussed. Remember that the stones were stained with blood and that the crowds cheered for the slow combustion of human flesh.
The empire called this civilization. It was a civilization that systematically optimized the art of suffering for viewing satisfaction.
So the final provocative question we leave you with is this. For a civilization so advanced, one that valued reason and law, why did power, when it was unchecked by accountability and amplified by bureaucracy, always default to optimizing suffering for viewing satisfaction?
What does the Colosseum tell us about the foundational fragility of any civilization, no matter how great its achievements?
Think about that next time you look at marble ruins.